I'm Courtney Julia. Today's video blog is about ratios in eating. Now, you've probably heard me say many times, eat protein. I say this quite often, and I don't always explain why I'm telling you to eat protein. The main reason why I'm telling you to eat protein is what I found that works for me is watching my ratios. I don't really count calories as much anymore. I do try to stay within a calorie range, but I'm more focused on my ratios. So I will explain what that means. I did write a blog about that, and the link is, if you just kind of look below in the more info, there's a link to that blog that might explain it a little bit better if you like to have stuff in front of you, a little bit more thought out, obviously, because I'm not just explaining it to you on the fly. But basically, my dietitian, a really good friend of mine, her name's Chelsea Bobchek. She works in Seattle. Her website's mybestbodyseattle.com or yourbestbodyseattle.com. She is a wealth of information, and if you're struggling with your diet, I highly recommend that you work with her one-on-one. She's going to be able to give you some tips that work for you alone versus something that's kind of encompasses the whole kind of a blanket effect. But what I found that works really, really well for me is to work on sticking to my ratios. So how the ratios work is if you eat 1 gram of protein to 1 gram of carbohydrate, you will most likely lose weight as long as you're not eating an exorbitant amount of calories within that 1-to-1 ratio. If you eat 1 gram of protein to 2 grams of carbohydrate, you will most likely maintain your weight. And if you eat 1 gram of protein to 3 grams of carbohydrate, you are most likely going to gain weight. And if we look at the typical American diet, we tend to have perhaps a bar that's got lots of carbs at breakfast, maybe even a scone or a bagel. That's all carbs, no protein. Even that little bit of cream cheese is actually more fat than protein. So our ratio at that point during the day is already probably 1 to 3, if not 1 to 2. So then we go to lunch, and we have maybe a sandwich or pasta from the pasta bar or pizza from the pizza bar. And once again, we're looking at 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, if not even worse at that point. And then we go home, we have dinner. And what do we have for dinner? Maybe we have pasta, spaghetti. That's all carbs, all carbs. And then maybe we have steak and a potato. Well, depending on how much steak you actually have and how big your potato is, you still may be above 1 to 1 because remember, potatoes are a starch, not really a vegetable. So starches are very heavy in carbs. So the typical American diet tends to have lots of carbs. So the best thing that you can start doing, and what I highly recommend, is start tracking your ratios. It gives you a lot more freedom. If you ever need to get back on track, maybe you went out for the weekend and ended up watching the football game and you had too many beers. Once again, those are all carbs. Probably gained a couple pounds over the weekend. I like to get right back to that 1-to-1 ratio to kind of lose those quick pounds really quickly, and then try to go back to the 1 to 2 to maintain. But getting back to 1 to 1 is a quick way to like get right back on track if you've had a bad weekend. The other thing is sometimes, you know, I like to come home from work and have a glass of wine or a beer. So I make sure I account for that in my diet. I make sure that, you know, maybe for breakfast I just have you know, some turkey sausage and eggs. All of a sudden now I've had basically 0 carbohydrates during the day. So that allows me the flexibility, as long as I'm within my calorie range, to have a glass of wine or 2 at dinner because that's all carb, but it will bump my ratio to a point where I'm going to maintain my weight or stay this, or even potentially lose depending on how my protein worked for the day. So that's kind of my biggest tip. That's how I work to stay on track, how I work to get back on track if I've gained weight. Might not work for everyone. I find that it works for a lot of people. It definitely works for me. It's something I definitely recommend trying. The best way to track that is by using an app like Lose It. I know Lose It breaks it down to percentages, so it's really easy to see whether or not you're staying within your ratios. Anyways, I hope that was a helpful tip for you, and good luck with your diet.